Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
The holiday season is upon us, and for some, it can be a difficult time. We recently spoke with a licensed therapist to discuss ways to handle the holidays for both drivers and their families. For many years, people with sleep apnea faced a predictable path, an in-lab overnight test followed by a prescription for a CPAP. But alternatives do exist for both testing and treatment. I'll speak with Dr. Kent Smith, an expert in the use of dental appliances to treat sleep apnea, about what else is out there. And finally, Congress narrowly averted a government shutdown in a recent vote, but a longer-term problem continues. I'll discuss what's happening and how it could affect some important trucking issues with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. The United Auto Workers says members have ratified new contracts at all big three automakers. We told you last week about UAW workers at General Motors approving a new contract on Thursday. One day later, UAW workers at Ford and Stellantis followed suit, where the margin of approval was more sizable. It brings an official end to 6 weeks of strikes at the three automakers. The new UAW contracts are mostly the same at all three companies. They include 25% wage increases through April of 2028 and better benefits. The cross-border trucking numbers for September are in. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics says freight valued at more than $82 billion was hauled by trucks across U.S. borders in September. That's down 6.4% from August, but an increase of less than 1% compared to September of 2022. The last time trucking cross-border freight experienced a year-to-year decrease was in February of 2021. Since then, it has been a more than 2-year streak of increases. Cross-border freight hauled by trucks across the U.S. northern border rose by nearly 5% compared to September of 2022. At the southern border, the value of freight increased by more than 3%. Interstate 10 through downtown Los Angeles is back open to traffic, defying expectations following a fire that damaged the freeway. A mile-long stretch of the freeway was shut down on November 11th while crews worked to assess the damage and make repairs. Initially, that work was expected to take up to 5 weeks, but officials say recent inspections showed that Interstate 10 was safe to open ahead of Monday morning's commute. During a press conference this weekend that included California Governor Gavin Newsom and other elected officials, Vice President Kamala Harris praised the workers who worked around the clock to get I-10 reopened.
The work that happened here is extraordinary, and it really is a function of the will and the ambition of the workers on the ground who understood what closure of the 10 would mean for folks on a daily basis.
That said, officials say there will be periodic closures over the coming weeks as crews make permanent repairs. An estimated 300,000 vehicles use that freeway each day. The fire is being investigated as an arson case. Over the weekend, investigators released photos of a person of interest, asking the public to help find him. Class 8 truck orders were down in October. ACT Research says some 32,000 tractors were ordered last month, down 24% compared to a year earlier. Export market orders were up 91%, and orders destined for Mexico were up 187%. Trailer orders, meanwhile, are on a similar path. ACT says October's preliminary net trailer orders were up more than 35,000 units from September to October, but down 26% compared to October of last year. The holiday season is upon us, and for some that can be difficult. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford has more.
Statistics show that although the holidays can be a joyful time, they can also be a time of stress, worry, and depression, especially for those on the road. Buck Black is a licensed therapist. He has a few tips on how to handle the holiday season.
So I think that as far as staying away from being fixated on celebrating on the date, I think that is definitely a big one. It's the idea of the holidays. The holiday can be celebrated on some other day, whatever that is convenient. And that makes life a whole lot better. And then the final recommendation about the grief or just the lack of family, that's a really, really hard one. And, some people, they say, all right, well, it's the holidays, but I'm not going to celebrate because that's too hard. And that's okay if you're in that camp. And sometimes people, well, I'll celebrate with somebody else. I'll celebrate with friends, or maybe I'll even celebrate with fellow drivers at a truck stop that I don't even know, and we'll see what happens. So doing whatever works for you in that unique way. And also it would be acknowledging the fact that grief is very difficult during the holiday times. And if you don't feel like doing anything, that is okay.
Black says therapy can be a helpful tool if you feel like you're struggling with your mental health. He says to reach out to a counselor in your home state. We'll hear more from Buck Black later in our show. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. Another day, another cargo theft in Philadelphia. We told you last week about a load of beef that was stolen from a trailer. Early this morning, Philly police say 6 men broke into a trailer that was parked at a Target store and stole multiple boxes, each containing 50 cans of talcum powder. AB6 News says a truck driver was inside the tractor at the time, but was not aware of the heist until after it was over. A total of 15 sites across Utah, including a Pilot Flying J travel center in Snowville, will be outfitted with new fast charging stations for electric vehicles. The Utah Department of Transportation said in a news release that adding these sites will double Utah's electric vehicle fast charging network. And by the end of 2024, electric vehicle owners will be able to travel anywhere along Utah interstates, as well as U.S. Highways 6 and 191 with access to fast chargers. Some $36 million in federal grants will pay for the project, along with about $7 million in private funding. While owned and operated by private companies, the chargers will be accessible to the public 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A spokesperson for UDOT told Landline that while the initial phase of the project is focused on light-duty electric vehicles, the state has submitted a grant application for funding for medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle charging infrastructure as well. A Coca-Cola bottler has taken delivery of 20 zero-emission battery electric trucks. Daimler Truck North America said the Freightliner eCascadia Class 8 tractors are now in the hands of Reyes Coca-Cola Bottling in Downey, California. The trucks will rely solely on 20 charging stations that have been installed at the company's facility and service customers throughout Southern California. A truck driver who destroyed an historic bridge in Illinois last week is looking for a new job. Wynn Logistics says one of its drivers took the bridge on Route 26 in Princeton, which was not meant for tractor trailers. The bridge was destroyed, so too was a truck's trailer. Wynn Logistics apologized for the mistake and said they had fired the driver, who had 11 years of experience behind the wheel. Wynn said they'll make sure that companies who want to hire her in the future will know about what happened. Nobody was hurt in the crash. And finally, a new survey shed some light on what Americans think of truckers and the trucking industry as a whole. Cloud Trucks polled 2,000 people to put together the 2023 How America Talks Trucks survey. Most of them said they have a positive view of truck drivers. 80% said truck drivers play a crucial role in the economy. 1/3 said truck drivers are not adequately compensated for their work. And some 35% of respondents describe drivers as industrious, overworked, and underpaid. As for what most people call the things that you drive, 18-wheeler was the most popular name nationwide in the poll. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, Ashley Blackford speaks with therapist Buck Black about ways to handle the holidays. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Landline now, welcome back. The holiday season is upon us, and for some, it can be a difficult time of year. Buck Black is a licensed clinical social worker therapist. He joins me now. Buck, can you talk to me about what you often hear from people this time of year who are struggling?
Well, there's a few different things that people struggle with during the holidays. So the first thing that would be unique to drivers, as we all know that, they stay out on the road over the holidays, most of them. So how do you celebrate the holidays and still keep making money, still keep your job and all of that? So that is a really tricky one. And I think that so many times there's discussions of, can your family be flexible on the dates of the get-togethers and maybe not be on the exact day of the holiday because that might not work. So we have the logistics. And then another piece that's just really common is any kind of family disagreements. Maybe it's been long-standing, or they've popped up in the last couple of months or something, and then all of the tensions surrounding that. And then the third main thing that happens is the opposite of the other things that I just said. So as far as maybe the driver doesn't have a family, or they've lost a really, important family member. They've lost one loved one or multiple loved ones, and there's all this hurt and all this grief, and then the holidays bring it back to the surface. So those are typically the three themes that I see on a regular basis for every holiday season.
And if anyone's listening and they relate to one of the things that you mentioned or more than one of the things, what do you recommend they do?
Well, those are all very complicated things, unfortunately. So I think that as far as staying away from being fixated on celebrating on the date, I think that is definitely a big one. It's the idea of the holidays. The holiday can be celebrated on some other day, whatever that is convenient. And that makes life a whole lot better. And some of the best holiday get-togethers I've personally ever been at actually happened in March one year. And it was fantastic. And it was kind of funny to be celebrating Christmas in March. But you know what? We were able to have a good time. So that's one piece. As far as the conflict goes, it's okay, well, what can you do to set things aside and focus on the holidays, focus on being together, and try to find something in common that everyone still has? And if you have to sit around and talk about the weather the whole time, well, at least you guys are together and it's something that is more positive. But I think that everyone can find something more positive to talk about than the weather. If you can play any kind of games, just do any kind of trivia, do something to help to break the ice and find some commonality. So that would be the recommendation there. And then the final recommendation about the grief or just the lack of family, that's a really, really hard one. And, some people, they say, all right, well, it's the holidays, but I'm not going to celebrate because that's too hard. And that's okay if you're in that camp. And sometimes people, I'll celebrate with somebody else. I'll celebrate with friends, or maybe I'll even celebrate with fellow drivers at a truck stop that I don't even know, and we'll see what happens. So doing whatever works for you in that unique way. And also it would be acknowledging the fact that grief is very difficult during the holiday times. And if you don't feel like doing anything, that is okay.
And kind of going back to the first thing that you mentioned with, deciding to celebrate at a different time. I know you and I have talked in the past about relationships and being on the road, being a truck driver. It's kind of one of those things that I assume you recommend people talk about maybe before making a commitment in a relationship of the realities of being a truck driver and, the holidays being one of them.
Oh, I would definitely agree with that statement for sure. This is what you're getting into if you're having a relationship with me, and it's not a traditional job. So I think the more that can be discussed, and the fact that, hey, I want this relationship to work out, and that I want to be there. Here's my limitations, and I'll do as many phone calls, as many video chats as possible. And then I always remind everybody to not rely 100% on texting, because more arguments can happen that way. But yeah, it's we'll work together, we'll make the best of it. And remember, any job has its problems and its impact on relationships and family life. So being a driver, it's just a little bit different, but doesn't necessarily mean that all the problems are with trucking. And if you had a different job, then everything would be bliss. It just really doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. How difficult, obviously being on the road, if you are, driving during Thanksgiving or Christmas, it can be hard on the driver. But talk to me about how difficult it can be for the families, the kids, and the spouses.
If we're dealing with young kids, they're not going to understand. And the whole idea of, the disclosure of, well, I'm a driver, so things are going to be different, that might make sense to your partner, but to your little kid, or your little kids, they're not going to understand that. So that's really hard. So as much communication as possible, and when you eventually get some home time, you make the best of it. And sometimes for the drivers, some of the most depressing times of the holidays is being away from their kids, having limited contact with their kids. So it is hard on everybody all the way around.
Can this time of year, if someone is battling with depression or anxiety, can this time of year make that worse?
So yes, it definitely makes it worse. And there are so many statistics. You can just simply Google seasonal affective disorder, and it's abbreviated SAD, that in the winter months, a lot of people are affected by that. And it's just simply the lack of daylight changes our brain chemistry, and it makes us feel more tired, more depressed. It doesn't affect 100% of people, but it affects a significant number. So you're dealing with the lack of daylight. A lot of people are dealing with the cold weather. It depends what part of the country that you're in, obviously. So you've got those two big things going on. And just as far as the weather, when you're a driver, all the stress related to the snow and ice, I would say that for drivers, I'm doing therapy sessions with them mainly because of the road conditions. And it's just the situational thing that's stressing them out to no end. So you've got the seasonal depression that's more likely, and then you've got the stress of the wintertime driving that's more unique to the drivers.
What are some signs people should look out for, not just during this time of year, but any time of year, that may be a cause for concern that they should reach out to someone?
Well, pretty much it's your mood. So to make it as simple as possible, if you're regularly in a bad mood, then you want to have that looked at and see what you can do to make that better. So it might come out in being really anxious, being really worried, just having these worry thoughts and these feelings that you're on edge. So that would be anxiety. The possible depression symptoms would be loss of interest, difficulty sleeping, especially waking up really early in the morning, often in the neighborhood of 2 or 3 a.m. That's often a thing that happens due to a change in brain chemistry when a person has depression. Lack of interest, sometimes sleeping too much, just really negative thinking, and just you're slowing down overall, and maybe you're not eating very much or you're eating too much. And sometimes depression also comes out as anger, especially for males, but it can do that for anyone. So, yeah, to sum it up, if you're not in a very good mood either way, and maybe your functioning is going down, maybe you're having some relationship problems, you're not sleeping so well, your eating habits are changing, then it's time to get that looked at if that lasts more than a few weeks. If it's just a few days, well, that's part of being human. But if it continues to hang on for weeks and weeks and weeks, have checked out.
One thing that I've noticed over the years myself, like I love the holidays, love Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's after everything's over that I feel like, well, I don't have anything to look forward to anymore. How important is that to have something to look forward to in regards to your mental health?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. That is a whole nother thing. We talked about the possible depression of the holidays, but yeah, there's plenty of people that do really good over the holidays. And then it's that crash in January after New Year's. If you have something to look forward to, if you find a way to continue to stay in touch with friends and family, that is the best thing that you can do. Just try to make sure that there isn't any nothingness. And the last thing that I'll say on this is it is entirely human that when you have this really elevated mood and you're busy and things are great and then there's nothing, that yes, you can just crash. And the ultimate example of this that I tell my clients on a regular basis is the Apollo astronauts that went to the moon. When they came back, they were, ecstatic with everything that they had accomplished. And there are several of those astronauts that have spoken on documentaries about how they had long-term depression as a result, because they came back to Earth and they said, all right, we went to the moon. Now what? There's nothing. And they dealt with depression for a good while.
That's interesting. I've never heard that story before. If someone is listening and they're thinking, it might be good for them to reach out and talk to someone, what do you recommend? Or if they don't know where to start with that, what do you recommend for that?
Well, therapy for drivers is a little bit more difficult because of the politics of, in general, you need to contact a therapist that's licensed in the state that you live in. And we're getting a little bit better with that as time goes on, that some states will allow therapists to talk with clients in certain other states. I just want to say that that's tricky. So to be safe, Google therapists and then your state and, make sure that they do teletherapy. That'll make life a whole lot easier. And there are some practices that do office therapy and teletherapy at the same time. So whenever you're in town, you could see the therapist in person if that's something that you would like to do. So that would be the best way to handle that. And then also, if you are in a crisis, calling the suicide prevention hotline is definitely one thing that you can do. And knowing that there is help out there outside of therapy if need be, and especially if it is emergency related. So those would be the main ways to get help with anything mental health related.
That was Buck Black talking about mental health around the holidays. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. For many years, people with sleep apnea faced a predictable path, an in-lab overnight test followed by a prescription for a CPAP. But alternatives do exist for both testing and treatment. I recently spoke with Dr. Kent Smith, an expert in the use of dental appliances to treat sleep apnea, about what else is out there. Tell us something about yourself, your background, your specialty, especially as it relates to sleep medicine.
Yeah, well, I started my career as a dentist and quickly realized that as a dentist, I couldn't change as many lives as I could if I helped those with sleep-disordered breathing, snoring, sleep apnea, and any other sleep problems. I realized that I could help as a dentist, so we started providing oral appliances for treating sleep-disordered breathing. After a while, this was probably 2.5 decades ago, and after a while, people started realizing that I knew more than the average dentist about this. So I started teaching seminars. I went to Las Vegas to start a curriculum there, and since have grown to 5 locations here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I haven't done dentistry in a long time, but we have brought on sleep physicians and nurse practitioners and PAs and psychologists. And my goal has been to be able to treat anybody with any sleep problem. And we've done a pretty good job of that. So it's something that I love to do because we get patients back together with their bed partners, keep the highways safer, people not falling asleep at the wheel, and preserve lives as well. Sleep-disordered breathing can lead to diabetes and a lot of other issues that people would rather not have. So that's sort of a short story as to where I started and where we are now.
Okay. A lot of the thing comes down to testing and treatment. And I'm curious, as far as testing, what the developments in recent years have been. What are the alternatives for testing now for people?
Yeah, for years, the gold standard was in-lab studies, and that became almost non-existent. They're still out there. We still have a lab ourselves that has 4 beds in it. So for certain types of people, those in-lab studies where you have to spend the night in another bed are still out there, still available, but primarily the industry has moved to at-home testing. And this could be anything from the type of a monitor you hook up yourself that you bring back into the office. There are disposable studies now where you just throw them away after you take them. And in certain situations, personnel can come out to the home of somebody and help set that up for them. But that's pretty much the gamut of where testing is right now.
How accurate are the various tests?
Well, insurance companies obviously have made decisions on these things, and this is what has ruled how we've progressed through history in the world of sleep. They finally agreed about 15 years ago that the home sleep testing was accurate enough. The technology had progressed enough that they were willing to allow those to be used to diagnose apnea and then to be used for prescribing treatment. So, and in the last 15 years, obviously technology has improved. The type of study you can throw away didn't appear until right before COVID. It was great timing because nobody wanted to go into a sleep lab during COVID, and we moved to primarily those kind of studies.
Let's talk a little bit about treatment here. And obviously, you deal with a lot of dental appliances as opposed, well, in addition to a traditional CPAP treatment. What are the options for treatment with dental appliances?
Well, there's the FDA has cleared over 100 different types of dental appliances. The idea is we want to get them as small and as comfortable and as unbreakable as possible. And that's what industry has been trying to do now for many years. There's never going to be a perfect mouth appliance, but they've gotten better, smaller, stronger, sleeker, more comfortable. They're made primarily by computers now, so the fit is much better. But there are quite a few different types of oral appliances. They all, in my opinion, are equally effective. It's just if the patient wears them, they work. If they don't wear them, they don't work. So that's why you have to get them to be as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, I've been curious about that because, of course, just FYI, I use a CPAP and have for some years, and I know that some people have trouble with the comfort of a CPAP. What is the comfort level of some of these dental appliances? I mean, that's always been a concern I've heard from people is, what sort of how comfortable those would be for them to wear while they were trying to sleep.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone. There will never be one. Like I said, there's never going to be a perfect appliance, and it's never going to be 100% comfortable, and the compliance is not ever going to be 100%. But most research shows with CPAPs, about 50%. Most people will try their best to wear them for the first month or two or three, but then it starts falling off after that. So around 50% of patients fall out of CPAP therapy. They're unable to wear it. And with oral devices, it's around 10 to 15%. So the compliance is better, but with the more severe patients, the appliances aren't as effective or not as predictably effective, I should say. We treat some severe patients with oral devices, and then some, they aren't as effective. So the compliance is better with oral devices, but efficacy is better with CPAP, or at least more predictable when you get to the more severe levels.
So what makes someone a good candidate for the dental appliances? I mean, you mentioned that on the more extreme cases that the CPAP is more effective, but what would make someone, conversely, a good candidate for a dental appliance, and what would make them a good candidate?
Well, having enough teeth is important because they do attach to the teeth, and you don't have to have teeth to wear a CPAP machine. So that's one thing, but primarily in the diagnosis of mild or moderate sleep apnea, they are as effective as CPAP machines, as predictably effective. So, we measure this disease in three different levels: mild, moderate, or severe. You're severe if you stop breathing at least 30 times every hour on average. Over 30 makes you severe. So anything less than that is predictably treated as well with an appliance as it is with a CPAP machine. So, but having said that, we treat a lot of people that are severe because they can't wear CPAP or refuse to wear CPAP. They say, I'd rather just die in bed than wear a CPAP machine. So it's a good thing that we have alternative treatments because a lot of people just can't wear PAPs.
Wow, that is kind of extreme, it seems to me, that they seriously would rather die than wear that?
Yes. I've had that said quite a few times to me by patients. And they're being dramatic, I am assuming, but they really refuse to wear CPAPs, just totally refuse. So they're looking for some alternative treatments. Now, they still want to get treated, but they just can't stand it. I think a lot of it is claustrophobia. That's probably the primary concern. They're not real sexy. With bed partners, they can make some noise. They've gotten quieter over the years, but it's not a fan favorite.
Well, those are some of the downsides to CPAPs. I'm curious, what are some of the possible downsides to dental treatment? I mean, are there common problems people run into with those?
Yeah. So we go over all of these before a patient ever moves forward with treatment, which I think is important. Every patient needs to know the kind of things that can go awry. The most important thing is just a change in the bite, the way your teeth fit together. We go over this in detail with patients, and I would hope every dentist that does this goes over it in detail, because that's the one thing you hear is it can mess my bite up or it'll hurt my TMJ. Really, everything that we do, so there can be muscle pain, there can be joint pain, there can be sore teeth, people with gag reflexes that have a hard time brushing their back teeth, for example. They could struggle with something that they put in their mouth. You could have dry mouth. You could have extra saliva. And we go over all these things with patients, and they're all reversible or fixable or, whatever. The only thing that is not reversible sometimes is the change in the way the teeth fit together, a change in your bite. And we go over in detail how you can avoid that. And we tell patients, we're not there every morning. We can't be there to watch you and to make sure your bite's correct. So really, it's going to be up to you. We're going to check you at follow-up to make sure it's good. But if your bite changes over time, it's going to be you that allows that to happen, because, we're telling you about it and we can't be there for you. So if it starts to change, you realize it, and you would rather go back to wearing a CPAP machine, or if you've never worn one, if you want to go that route, then of course that's what you should do. We have patients that bites change and they don't care because they're sleeping with their bed partner. They're feeling good and rested, and they're not falling asleep at the wheel. And they're just, that's a good trade-off for them.
Okay. Well, doctor, is there anything else about this topic that you think people really need to know?
Well, I think an important thing is some people will look to get treated and try to do it without a sleep study. But this is a medical condition, and you cannot treat a medical condition without a diagnosis. And the only way to diagnose it is with a sleep study. And a lot of people avoid sleep studies because they automatically assume that they will move into a CPAP machine if they ever have a sleep study. And that's not true. So I don't want people to get scared off for doing a sleep study, because there are other treatments available. I think that's probably the most important thing, because so many people are afraid to do a study. And, we check our blood pressure, we do prostate exams, we do colonoscopies, we do mammograms, we do all these testing, but we sleep a third of our lives. And if we don't test how well our sleep is and how healthy our sleep is, then that's a mistake. That should be done, at least every few years, just because you don't know what's going on during sleep. 85% of people that have apnea have no idea they have it.
Yeah, it strikes me that as I've always been told that usually if someone's going to spot it, it's going to be the spouse that sees it, not the person that has it.
Yeah, that's very true. They're more likely to know when that patient is gasping and coughing and obviously snoring and nonstop snoring. That bed partner loses an hour and a half of sleep every night as a result of chronic snoring and being afraid that their bed partner is going to die in bed. So it's unhealthy for relationships for sure, but that bed partner is much more aware. They're not perfect diagnosticians by any means. They have no idea. The patient stops breathing 35 times every hour all night. So testing, if the bed partner realizes that person needs to be tested or needs to do something, they really don't know most of the time. They need to be tested. So that's probably the most likely reason that somebody comes in. And sometimes the bed partner comes in with the patient to make sure they show up.
I can see that as being necessary in some cases.
Oh, yeah. Our treatment rooms are actually designed to be bigger because we know there's going to be two people coming in most of the time.
Again, that was Dr. Kent Smith, an expert in the use of dental appliances to treat sleep apnea, talking about dental alternatives to traditional sleep apnea treatments. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Congress narrowly averted a government shutdown in a recent vote, but a longer-term problem remains. Here to discuss where we are, what's next, and why it matters is Bryce Mungin of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. Bryce, how are you?
Mark, I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So this all involves the government funding bills that Congress has to pass every year. And the recent votes, what specifically did they pass at that time?
Yes. So Congress basically they passed in technical terms called a continuing resolution, but in layman terms, it's really just a way to kick the can down the road and buy some more time to come to a final agreement on funding decisions. So the government's fiscal year runs out at the end of September. So obviously we are well past that deadline. The Congress already agreed to push this deadline off a little further. So now what they've done, it's something different than what they've done before. We'll see how it plays out in practice. But basically, they've extended some government programs and agencies through January 19th and other programs through February 2nd. So between now and those dates, they're going to have to continue to negotiate between the House and Senate and the President and come up with spending bills that they can agree can be signed into law.
So you mentioned the part of the deal that has that deadline of January 19th for funding certain departments. What funding expires on January 19th?
Yes. So for our interests, the transportation funding bill will run out on January 19th. So programs will continue through that date. And probably helpful point to make right now is that the Department of Transportation is a little bit different than a lot of the other programs we talk about when we talk about government funding. And that's because of the way funding for highway programs works. Generally speaking, funding that's coming from the Highway Trust Fund is sort of on autopilot, or it's at least from outside of this appropriations process. So a good deal of the programs that are under the Department of Transportation, that are under the highway programs, will continue even if the government were to shut down. That includes FMCSA, but that's how it's worked in the past. We still always have to wait to see when it comes up to that deadline how the agencies say they're going to handle things. But there's other programs, discretionary grants that go out underneath the Department of Transportation that would be potentially held up by a government shutdown.
So with the transportation bill, there were several issues that were tied up in that spending bill, policy matters.
Yeah.
What were some of the ones related to trucking?
Yeah. And so this is really what we've been watching even more closely is on the House side. The House's transportation bill includes a prohibition on a speed limiter mandate as well as the automatic emergency braking mandate. So basically, if this language was included in the final version of the bill, FMCSA and NHTSA under the AEB mandate would not be able to work on either of those mandates. And so that's why we're supportive of this legislation passing through the House, because while we worked to see similar language included on the Senate side, that language is not in the Senate bill. So basically, the best chance that we have is to see this transportation bill pass the House, so it lays down that marker so that it shows support for these policies. So as long as the House is trying to work these issues out, and for as long as they can't reach an agreement, that's going to make it more difficult to ultimately be successful on these two appropriations riders, as we call them.
Okay. What is the state of negotiations on the overall funding package at this point?
Yeah, they've still got a lot of work to do. So much of this, funding debate and the disagreement is tied up in the leadership, whatever you want to call it, the leadership brouhaha, the leadership chaos, or whatever you want to call it in the House. because there was a block of Republicans in the House that did not like the top-line spending numbers that former Speaker McCarthy agreed to, and that was ultimately a large part of what led to him being removed from the speakership. And so one of the big problems that needs to be addressed between the House and the Senate is just those top-line spending numbers, because the Senate is working on appropriations bills. They're working on those funding bills that use those numbers that were agreed to early in the year between the House, Senate, and the President. But Republicans in the House, where they have the majority, have pushed for lower spending levels than that previous budget agreement. So as long as the two chambers are working on different top-line budget amounts, it's going to be very difficult to reach any sort of agreement. And even aside from those issues, you also have these different policies that are included in some of the spending bills. Transportation certainly is where we're watching, but you have things, involving, the Department of Justice. You have things involving salaries for members of the administration. So there's a whole other list of issues that need to be worked out before they can reach agreement on these funding bills.
Well, separately from the funding bills, are there other efforts in Congress to stall things like speed limiters or automatic emergency braking?
Yes, and so on speed limiters, we have legislation we've been promoting both in the House and the Senate that would flat out prohibit FMCSA from issuing a speed limiter mandate, and we continue to grow support on each of those bills. And ultimately, that would be any way we can stop this is great, but legislation would be the better solution to this, because with a funding prohibition, you've got to come back every year and say, you can't do it with this year's fund. So in some ways, having it on an appropriations bill is only a temporary fix. On the flip side, on the AEB mandate, that's a little bit it's a little bit different and a little bit trickier, because that mandate was required by the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So that is something that Congress specifically tasked the DOT with doing. And so where we've really focused our efforts on the emergency braking mandate is to make sure that it's being done correctly, because we have serious concerns that the department is not consulting with truckers and consulting with the regulated community as Congress required them to do. In that bipartisan infrastructure law, Congress said you have to consult with truckers about the concerns with this technology, and you've got to make sure that any concerns are ironed out before issuing a mandate. So we're really focusing our pressure and our efforts on making sure it's done correctly. Certainly, if we could see it rolled back, that would be great. But at the same time, the fact that it's already been signed into law as a mandate, it's a little more challenging than the speed limiter mandate, where it's just something that the department basically has decided to take up on their own.
When are we likely to see Congress buckle down and get to work on all of this?
We will see. If you're interested in congressional politics and leadership politics in Congress, there's a lot to watch right now, because ultimately it's when are they going to come to an agreement? And the problem in the House is you've got a block of conservatives who want to see more cuts, and then you've got more moderate members or members on the transportation bill from the Northeast who opposed cuts to Amtrak and rail funding. So if you cut the rail, you maybe bring those more conservative members on, and you lose those members from the Northeast New York area, and vice versa. You add the funding back in, you're going to lose some more conservative members. So they've really got to, I think it's going to take a while. I think they're going to need to work through a lot of things. I would be surprised if it's wrapped up by January 19th. I know it sounds like it's a ways out from now, but just given how big these bills are and how much there is to work through, I think we may see another kick of the can.
Okay. Well, Bryce, thank you very much for the information. We sure appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been talking with Bryce Mungen of OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office. And folks, if the speed limiter or automatic emergency braking mandates are something important to you, call your members of Congress, especially right now in the U.S. House. You can do that by dialing up the U.S. Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121. Thank you for joining our show today. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.